You can think of someone who has the most beautiful intent and really wants someone else to be happy. They're kind heart. We all know these people. They're so down on themselves. They're so negative toward themselves. They might be self-deprecating or, oh, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I did that. That even though they really don't mean it, when you're around them, you feel some of that. You're picking up on that, and you might be, well, they're judging themselves that harshly. How harshly would they judge me? How harshly should I judge myself?
You're listening to the Do You Feel Heard podcast, a production of Do You Feel Heard, a group of communication coaches helping people just like you find their voice and feel heard.
I'm wondering if you'd be open to starting us off with a very brief breathwork practice to help us kind of settle into this space before we open the container for this podcast.
I would love to. Yeah, sorry for being late, everybody. Thanks for having me. Letting me into the room anyway. I would love to. All right, everybody. Let's just take a moment to settle into our space, acknowledging our surroundings, acknowledging anything from the day. If you feel comfortable, close your eyes and settle in. If not, just lower your gaze. Acknowledge the day so far, all the accomplishments and challenges. Acknowledge anything coming up in the future you're excited or nervous about, dreading or looking forward to. And just allow it to be, knowing that all these things have their place and giving yourself permission to arrive here and now, in this moment. Feel this intention by focusing on your breath, wherever you feel it most. And we'll take 3 deep breaths together. Breathing in through the nose, filling the belly, filling the chest. The top slip in just a little more air. And then let everything go. Breathing out through the mouth. Feeling your shoulders soften. Feeling the muscles of your face soften. Exhaling fully. And breathe in again, even deeper. Feeling the belly expand, feeling the chest expand, creating even more space. And when you're all the way full, let go completely. Breathing out through the nose. Letting go of anything that does not serve you. And finally, take the biggest breath you've taken all day. Breathing in deep. At the top, sipping in even more air. And when you're ready, let go completely, breathing out through the mouth. Arriving here in this container. When you're ready, open your eyes and thank yourself for the moment of mindfulness.
Thanks, Derek. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Glad everybody's here. Excited for this first episode. Curious if anybody has anything on their mind that they would like to bring into this container before maybe I offer some things to talk about.
What I shared in the chat is still top of my mind. Nothing else has come closer to that. Very briefly, just the practice of looking beneath the words. I think this really resonates for me because I'm so wordy and heady and intellectual, and I can like to rationalize. And so for me, one of the biggest parts of this work has been getting to be willing to accept whatever's on the words, the things we say to each other, the things that are said to us and the things we say, and accept that and not just get attached to it and try to have the space to look below it, the emotions underlying it, below that to the needs underlying it, and to try to communicate on all those levels, especially the needs, not taking things personally, and trying to communicate authentically with all those in mind. That's been maybe the most eye-opening thing for me and something I'm still practicing and have a lot of practice to go with.
I hear you. I'm curious how does reflection touch into that. Have you found that reflection has helped make sure that you're not making assumptions or jumping to conclusions about what's beneath their words? Has it been helpful to reflect back, hey, this is what I'm hearing you say, rather than maybe assuming what's beneath their words and what their experience might be or their emotions might be?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like you said, first by checking those assumptions and kind of helping me at least get the rational part, the word part, the surface layer even more dialed in, and also by bypassing my normal reactivity or reaction of just responding right away, going on to the next thing, getting the thing that was lit up inside me out there as soon as I can. By bypassing that, that's already helped to let some of those feelings and emotions come up. And then in the reflection, I often find that I'm clarifying for myself some of the emotions I heard, some of the needs that I heard, and it's coming to mind. And then, especially whenever I ask, do you feel heard? The response can often tell me even more about that, especially if they don't feel heard. I find in the second part, often the unmet need or the emotion comes through even more clearly. So absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, the thing that came up for me in that was like the resisting of the impulse of like, oh, they said this thing and now I'm a little reactive, or I have this feeling that comes up and I want to respond with it so I can let it go and I don't have to feel it. Like, ooh, they said this thing that was kind of a jab. Well, I'm going to get rid of whatever this feeling is by sending it back to the response by responding with maybe a little bit of a loaded, or there's like emotion kind of like infused in my response. And I find that by reflecting first, it not only does it give them clarity on what I heard, but it gives me clarity too of like, am I like, did I hear them completely? Is my reactivity here like within me or what they said? And like, it helps me, it forces, the reflection forces us, which gives me time for like introspection.
Yeah, I agree. That reflections do kind of almost force you to not do that habit of you hear one piece and then you formulate your response in your head. And then from then on, a lot of times we're not even hearing what they say. Knowing that you're going to reflect back to them what they're saying, it almost forces you to fully listen and just take in what they're saying and not just focus on your response.
Yeah, absolutely. Nicole, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. This one's still a big challenge for me. It is something that I'm definitely not getting right every time. I think, it's a lot easier for me when it's not from a place of conflict. Actually, in fact, if it's I'm talking to a friend or my partner and it's not, it's more so about what's going on with them or in their world. But then when it comes to something in which I'm to be engaged with, I'm a participant of what the conversation is about. This is a challenge. And because it's still so innate to either defend or to yeah, exactly what you said, Ian, to want to push it back on someone in a sense. And not something I'm proud of, but I'm noticing that it is something I'm becoming more aware of, at least. And then I am able to sort of slow down, but the automatic response is still the other one. So this is something I'm playing around with a lot, but what I've really been thinking about a lot with this is actually, why are we so hesitant to hear people and hesitant to say, I'm sorry? Like, why is that something that we do automatically want to defend against or push back on someone? When did we learn that saying I'm sorry if we've done something to hurt someone, or that somebody's feeling, rejected or disconnected or whatever, when did we learn that we needed to make excuses or defend against that? Or that we couldn't just say, oh, wow, I'm so sorry, I didn't know you were feeling that way. So this is something I've been trying to also sort of take in with that, is it doesn't have to be something, even if I'm, after the reflecting, I don't have to have my excuses or my defenses or whatever. So those are kind of going hand in hand if I can connect the two of them, because it is when I understand those needs, it does become a lot easier to just empathize and realize, they're hurting or they're needing in a sense. And I don't have to change that.
Yeah, I agree that that part is
but
that part is definitely a challenge. Like, even though we're like practicing this work, it's still hard sometimes to do that like automatically, like forming a response. So I definitely hear you that is a challenge. And as far as the like, why is it difficult to say sorry? I don't know that this is the answer, but the first thing that came to my mind is that I think that like as children, when we're younger, I feel like a lot of people don't feel the need to explain themselves to children. Like, I feel like people don't maybe take their concerns as seriously. Like, if you're a kid and something happens that bothers you, you speak up about it. There's a chance that an adult might not take it as seriously as they would if you were an adult bringing that problem up. So maybe since it's kind of modeled for us that like that excuse making and not taking accountability and apologizing, maybe it's modeled for us and that's just how we like adapt it. That's just the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah, that's interesting. For me, it's funny you brought up childhood. I had a different perspective about childhood. From my childhood experience, there were times where I was forced to say I was sorry when I didn't mean it. So you say sorry for doing this thing, but I wasn't sorry because I didn't feel responsible. I didn't feel like I had done anything wrong, but that sorry was imposed on me, which made me feel like I had done something wrong, which I disagreed with. And so throughout life, there were times where I felt like if I said sorry, that's me taking responsibility for having done something wrong in this situation. And so if I don't feel like I did anything wrong, I'm not going to apologize. And that was a hill that I would die on for many years. It's like, I'm not saying sorry because I didn't do anything wrong here. I'm not wrong, so I'm not saying sorry. And so I got really stuck on that until I learned that you can apologize for the impact that happened, that you created unintentionally. You may not do it. You may not have done anything wrong at all. And yet there was still an impact on want to happen. And so you can be sorry for that, but maybe not sorry for the actions you took. You may still feel like justified or like you had done the right thing and still be sorry for what happened, despite that.
That's a really good point.
That's the angle. I'm sorry I'm sorry that you were hurt by this sort of thing. Like, I'm sorry that you felt that way. I'm not sorry for what I did. But There is so much nuance in that, right? And there is power in an apology and letting somebody be heard and giving them the, I'm sorry, I'm sorry that happened. And that was your experience with it, without saying it as the same, I'm sorry. Oh, I feel like I don't know how to explain that.
Yeah, it's less dismissive.
Too.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way. Like, that's not real. You're putting it on them versus taking accountability for income, not necessarily you having done something wrong.
I think even another layer to that is I'm sorry you feel that way. There's, I'm sorry for what's going on. I'm sorry for what I did. But more than even that, I love the question, Nicole. When I was thinking about it, like, why do we have this defensiveness or shame? Part of me, I think part of it is that we're sometimes unwilling or unable to feel someone's pain. I can be feeling the other person's pain and hurt, whatever's being there, just theirs, regardless of our involvement in it. Then if we actually were involved, we did do something that some part of us, consciously or unconsciously, does feel responsible for, and we feel our own pain at hurting that person, or our guilt for it, or our shame. For me, at least, I feel like that is what I can bring awareness to, is what the block is for me when I can't do the apology. I can't actually, bear that pain. So my mind, my intellectualizing, some rationalizing is going to swoop in and find that I'm sorry that you're feeling that way. That's not on me, and try to keep me separate and not connected to protect me from the pain.
So what you're saying, Derek, is it's, I'm sorry my actions hurt you, but I'm not sorry about my actions. Is that what you're getting at?
Mm-hmm. that can be. I can see it multiple ways. Even if you don't take any responsibility for it, and whether that's right or wrong, someone says something, sometimes you can just deny even that, even if you're not taking it personally, it has nothing to do with you. They're saying something, might even deny that hurt and try to invalidate their truth. And regardless of you. But I do think often, especially in relationships, it is very, the responsibility is obviously being thrust between the two of you. And there is something that is keeping me from taking the responsibility as well, or the accountability.
Derek, I wonder on that subject, the guilt that you're talking about, this resistance to like wanting to sit with the guilt that's being felt in regard to like the other person's experience. I wonder how that's connected to this idea of like should, right? Like I shouldn't have done that. I feel guilt because I should not have done this thing, which again is this implication of having done something wrong, which doesn't have to be present in accepting that there was an outcome that they experienced, and that you are sorry that they felt, even though you didn't necessarily do anything wrong. And this is where I think domain comes in.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I love that connection. There's the shoulds, and related to shoulds are the assumptions that we're holding all the time. Not just the assumptions we're making, but what are the assumptions we're holding as like the ground rules for the game? The queen moves this direction, the pawn moves this direction. But no one ever agreed that we're playing chess. There's no set of rules that we're all agreeing on here. And so those assumptions, I think, really, that's one layer I've been trying to even, catch a glance of and start to bring into awareness, is what are the assumptions that are so deep down that I can't even imagine someone else isn't, in this game with me, that are holding me back. So maybe in this example, maybe there's an assumption that I am not supposed to, cannot, I should not, but should in there. But even further than that, I'm not supposed to hurt anyone ever. And if I do, I am bad or wrong, or I'm going to lose the game. Did we all sign up for that? Did we all sign up to be perfect? And if we hurt someone, we're wrong? I didn't sign that contract, but some part deep down feels like it. So immediately when I am a human and I hurt someone or I say something careless, I broke the rules. I'm bad, shame, guilt. Let's deny it. Let's push it down. Let's rationalize it. And I might be doing that entirely on my own. The other person might understand that I'm a human even. And by making that assumption, by holding it, I'm disconnecting and, torturing myself in the game of my own creation.
Absolutely.
The people pleaser in me just was like, wait a second. What do you mean? I'm allowed to, nobody said I can't ever hurt anybody. Right. I can't ever make, somebody feel, well, can't make anybody feel anyways, what way, but, that anyone can never be wronged by me. So, Wow. Thanks, Derek. I'm going to ponder that one for a good time.
That's wonderful. I love that. I'm learning with all of you. And Ian, I like that you brought in domain there. Can you speak more about how domain goes into this and how that relates to this assumption and shoulding that's going on?
Yeah, certainly. So where I was connecting these two concepts to is in this guilt that we're feeling about the other person's experience, while when we fuse apart, we take apart my domain, your domain, their domain, we recognize that we're not responsible for anybody else's experience because their experience is in their domain. And so there is no should that we can attach to a situation regarding someone else's experience, because they have a right and a responsibility to experience things the way that they're experiencing them. We all within our domain, along with our feelings and all of these things. The other thing that's also, I believe, inside of everyone's domain is their perception of their experience. They get to choose. We all get to choose how we perceive our reality to be happening. We get to choose how we perceive somebody saying something to us is going down. I can perceive you as being, ill-willed, or I can perceive you as being, genuinely trying to be helpful. And, somebody comes by and kicks you. Well, I can perceive you to be trying to hurt me, or I can perceive you as projecting your feelings and your frustrations onto me, and therefore having compassion and love for you, right? That's a more extreme, but I get to choose how I perceive my reality. Therefore, since that's with Maine, somebody else perceiving whatever it is that they're perceiving, that's within their domain, and I'm not responsible for it. So I shouldn't carry any guilt about them experiencing their reality the way that they're experiencing it, because that's within their domain.
Thank you. Absolutely. That's one of those assumptions I feel like that we make. We are responsible for other people's feelings, and how much of that or reactions, and how much of that is based on our childhood reinforcements, like you all mentioned earlier, and also just our language. I just think so much of the language of you made me feel this way, you did this, and so often I keep trying to form that new pathway of using I statements primarily. I feel this, but so often if you look around and if you interact, I hear you a lot more than I hear you a lot more than I. And it's something, that's a topic I actually want to write my next blog post on for helping the herd. I already thought of the title. The eyes have it. The eyes have it with I, and trying to get there, because that's a powerful one too. And what a basic word in the I and you. What a basic bit of language. I come back to the language more and more, and it's all related, like you said, to the childhood reinforcements. But maybe just because I'm such a rational, wordy person, I fixate on the words. I think about how I've been more or less brainwashed and programmed by language my whole life, and how it's continuing to be reinforced. So language is always one of those things I come back to and try to be a stickler on for myself, and hopefully, start to model better language over time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Something that just popped up for me is the inherent in our language, this idea of separation. There's I and you. And so we are completely separate, and therefore taking individual responsibilities, when I feel like in a lot of cases, that's an illusion, because it takes two people to have an experience together. There is no one person that's completely responsible for anything in a relationship, whether it's familial, whether it's romantic, whether it's platonic. It takes two people to have an experience. It takes two people to have have a conversation. And this idea of, well, I did this or you did this, it really creates a false perception of what's happening. And also, it's a really easy way to skirt any responsibility and put it all on somebody else. So again, we can avoid this guilt that we feel for playing a part in an desirable experience.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it takes two people to have an experience together. And a lot of times, we have good experiences, we have bad experiences too. And sometimes when we have bad experiences, it's easier to blame it on the other person than to actually sit with what we're feeling. Like, it's something that is really hard to adapt to, is like being okay with just sitting with the feelings you're having and like experiencing those feelings, like, having introspection about them, thinking about like, well, why am I feeling this way? What led me to feel this way? Rather than just, sometimes it could be easier, unfortunately, like to put it on the other person, and that leads to like blaming and things like that. So yeah, I definitely agree with you.
I see this. I mean, I both agree with this in many instances, but there are also so many instances out there in which, yes, something happens between two people, but it is instigated by one. The other is just a participant there. For instance, like you said, Ian, someone walks up and punches you in the face. What is the we here, right? I was punched in the face by a random passerby. Sure, we experienced this thing together. My face hit fist, but there is also and like, I can maybe feel compassion. Like, clearly there's something not right with this person. And also a bit of blame of like, towards this other person of, I feel really angry in response to you punching me in the face just now. This is not a we thing in that case, and I can think of, situations in which, people are taken advantage of, or unknowing participants in a we interaction, essentially, but they really are the done to without actually receiving a gift or accepting a gift. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, are you available to explore a scenario? You said you can think of a few examples. I'd love to, if you're available to, I'd love to maybe dissect and pull that one apart.
I mean, I'm sitting here right in front of old books that I grabbed about consent and American hookup culture. So, I think that there's how, and I am currently feeling my heart racing and in my stomach, even at the thought of this. And there are countless experience or stories of people and women who have been, drunk at parties and carried upstairs by frat guys or non-frat guys. But a particular story I'm thinking of is of frat guys, and that's a hard one to use this same compassionate language, this sort of not separating the I from the you on. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there for now because I feel my emotions right now, and I'm going to sit with those and tend to those for a moment.
I hear you. Let me pose my question then to everyone and anyone who feels like answering. Just go ahead and jump in that way, Nicole. It's not all put on you as your heart in this. Would you say that? And we can even remove the element of like a woman being taken advantage by a man, because I feel like that is already kind of a heightened scenario. So let's just say any two people. Okay, then A is inebriated in some sort of a social element, and then person B takes advantage of person A. Would we say that person A has no responsibility to take in being in that situation, that it's all on person B?
If you'll allow me, I don't know if A or B will do it for me. Or sorry, answers A or B selection. I'm gonna zoom it out just a little bit. It's not the best answer, so I'm excited to hear everyone else maybe do it. But I can't get over thinking about more of a Buddhist concept that zooms out a little bit of interdependent origination as primary in Buddhism. And it's basically that all events, situations are interdependently originated or arise in interdependence with all other things. Everything is connected. So when you're asking that question, my mind is going toward, why were they drinking? Why was one person having that desire? Why was there alcohol? What society do they live in where there was alcohol around? Why are they having that reaction? Why are their desires being expressed in this way? What unmet needs do they have? Why did this person get drunk enough to where they were not able to handle the situation in a different state than they could have been? Why were they not doing this? My mind just goes out and tries to embrace the complexity. And that's the way my mind is working around this, and how I've got closer to the more of a union in language versus the separation. I think that inherent separation just really gets us away from reality. And so it's not you and I, or, it really is always a we, as far as I can tell, and trying to figure out exactly where to put blame becomes not just, it's already maybe not useful, but it also becomes futile and really patently false. That you're never going to get close to reality there. I fully respect why we do it and why we have to, and why personal responsibility is a concept and a useful one in society. But that interdependence is where my mind goes for this, for what that's worth. Didn't answer your question very well, but
I think you did. I think you absolutely answered that question. I think that you spoke specifically to how it isn't all on person B, and it's also not all on person A. We all have responsibility to take in how we ended up where we were. We make choices, and those choices are influenced by, an infinite number of things. And those things lead us to situations that we have chosen to put ourselves in. And we actively have choices that we make. And I think you touched on that perfectly.
Thanks, sir.
Dawson, Nicole?
You're not wrong that this also includes like the culture that this exists in, right? Like that is a very unfortunately common trope or thing that happens in the college sphere very often, because it exists in a society where that both of these things, the binge drinking, the losing control, and the quite frankly non-respect or understanding of consent. So I find issue with that because consent to me in so many ways, and in particularly in that scenario, feels so like abundantly clear to me. But for whatever reason, it's not in that culture. And you're also right that it includes, I think, bystanders too in the collective we there. Why has nobody stepped in? How is this happening? How is it gotten from point A to point B? Is not a single person's responsibility. I don't know if that's the right word. However, I think, that the fact that this is still something that is so common, speaks to the fact that we're not getting it right. There's something happening where we are not getting this concept correct of consent, of personal responsibility, right? So I guess, where do we go with that? How do we address this collective conscious, if you will, so that this wouldn't have been or isn't such a common thing? And, I don't think in an hour-long podcast we're going to be able to talk, figure out the answers to that and implement it everywhere. But, I guess I don't know. I feel like there are so many things that need to be looked at here, it's a mess, in my opinion. I don't know. I've gotten us quite off topic here, haven't I?
Yeah,
edit all this out, just
the
cutting room floor.
I think it's demonstrating the point earlier of that, like our perspective is in our domain, and we can view this as a giant mess that's impossible to resolve or unmess, I guess.
Impossible is not the word I would use.
Well,
it requires effort on many people's parts, but impossible doesn't feel like the right word there.
It would take a tremendous amount of shifts in culture globally, in order to get to some of these concepts that we're talking about specifically. Like, well, why are these like environments happening in specifically just, if we just zoom in specifically on college campus interactions to dissect and be able to rectify all of the damaging and unhealthy perpetuated patterns and habits would be quite the undertaking for just that one scenario of the culture and society that we interact in, and then zoom out and go to all the other ones would be something that over 100,000 hour-long podcasts, we would barely break the surface. It would take a complete reframe and unity of culture to really, like, in all cultures, which, we don't have to use the word impossible, but a lot of lifetimes of people dedicated to this, having an act like in a position to really make changes, in order to impact all of those things.
I appreciate that
you're doing.
Well, yeah, I agree. We are certainly doing our part to hopefully bring awareness and tools to people so that they individually can apply these concepts in their life, of the reframe of consent and the reframe of how do we communicate, and are we taking, ownership of our domain. I think that we are certainly chipping away where we can and affecting things positively where we're able to. I agree. Derek, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I appreciate your use of language and being really clear with the language there. Impossible. Impossible on what time scale? I keep
Right.
coming back to that to avoid absolutes. Another thing I really work on in my lexicon is taking out the always and the nevers, and maybe impossible is an absolute too. I haven't thought about that one as well. But impossible over what time scale becomes something that I can, over thousands of years, over millions of years, maybe impossible over an hour, sure. Maybe impossible over 100 hours, but over what time scale? So, but I take everyone's point. Very difficult, at least very, very difficult to solve. But again, I guess my head must be cold because my Buddhist hat keeps coming on. I guess that must be why. But another way of looking at it, is there a problem and does it need a solution? As soon as we put that framework on it, how do we solve the problem? We already bring in some of that separation, bring in a lack of acceptance. And at the end of the day, acceptance is, I think, a real superpower to see reality clearly. It's very similar to what I was talking about earlier, where I couldn't accept someone's pain. So I am doing all these mental gymnastics around the reality that, okay, they hurt. So whenever we take a slightly different view, and also, like you pointed out earlier, and I love that, everyone's domains includes those perspectives. I think in this interdependent play, there's no right or wrong. There's different perspectives that eventually harmonize toward the whole picture. And that whole picture is what it is. You can say it's perfect. You could say it's a mess. You can say whatever, but it is what we have, is everyone, all things existing at this point in time that we can expect. That's what we have. Is that a problem or is that a solution? Is it just a thing? Is something we get to choose. Like, so that's within each of our domains, a choice that we have. And I find that acceptance is a great place to start, to get away from some of the blame, some of the moralism, some of the just, I don't know, just indignation that we feel at the pain and suffering in the world. And the tricky part is, at least for me, is not letting that invalidate that there's injustice and we want to do something about it. But I think maybe almost paradoxically, when you take away some of that fire from we need to fix that right now, or at least within the next 100 years, we might be able to see it a little more clearly because we're not so overwhelmed by the weight of all these infinite factors. And like you said, Nicole, I think the work of trying to be heard and hear others, and more importantly, hear others and to be heard, is just an incredible place to start. And from what I've found, most of the issues do go away with that. It sounds simple, but when you dig into what it actually means to hear and to actually be heard, that's as close to a solution as I could get for something that's not a problem.
That's a great point. I want to add one thing onto what you said, which was that when we shift the focus to, well, there's a problem and we need to solve it, now the blame is just being put on the problem, which again removes self-responsibility from the area of domain. Well, it's not, there's no responsibility for me to take because there's an inherent problem that's here and that needs to be fixed, not how I show up in these solutions, in these situations. And so, well, I was just having this conversation recently with someone around how suffering is something that comes from a lack of accepting what is, right? I feel this way and I don't want to feel this way because I don't want this thing to be the way that it is, but it is. And if you can accept what is, from there, you can get into your authentic domain and choose how you want to show up with what is. And so I just wanted to put that in there. That's something that came up.
Yeah, I think it would take like a tremendous amount of work, as you guys have all said. And yeah, I agree that I think the work we're doing, basically just like communicating with compassion and having less like goals, like communicating with like trying to get certain results or like, being intentional with it, but with compassion being the intention, and like truly trying to hear each other and understand our wants and our needs, is like a really good place to start with such a like, you know, heavy thing to take on.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something that like a lot of people, you know, are missing, is like the communicating with like compassion part.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts that we have on this topic? See a lot of nodding, and then I also see Nicole on something. It looks like you got something.
No,
No.
no.
All right.
I was admiring. I love that Derek will close his eyes and nod when people talk. I just really love. I can see, and you always have like a little gentle smile, and I was just thinking about that actually, and then it brought a little smile to me. So that was what I was focused on in this.
I think that's a great example of communicating with compassion. Like, Derek, you make us feel heard without even really saying anything. Like that's a
We
part.
feel heard in response to Derek's reaction.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, like part of communication is like, you know, body language sometimes too, and not necessarily only the words that we say. So yeah, I think that's a good example. Like, you know, body language is a big part of it too.
Oh, but I want to bring the body language. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just a statistic from my educational background was that 70% of communication is verbal. And so recognizing how much we're actually getting from the body language, from the like the tone, it's not so much the words that are really delivering our communication to other people. The eye roll, the scoff, the, you know, the body language. I cross my arms, and immediately, well, that person's closed. And whether it's been communicated to you directly or not, that's what that means, intuitively, it is something that you receive. It's something that you are receiving from them. And then subtle energy body. I mean, that's a whole nother topic to dive into, but energetically, if I'm feeling a type of way and I'm in the same view, especially, we are going to find equilibrium. We're going to find a balance. So if I'm down here and you're up here, just being in the same room, we're going to end up here. I'm going to bring you down to my level because you are in the same space as me. And so those things are happening too in the background.
I appreciate all those observations, and I'll try my best not to take those personally and inflate any egos here, but I appreciate it. I'm so glad that you all, at least at this moment, feel heard. And I just love those points that you brought up, especially that nonverbal communication. And I was thinking the same thing, Ian, about crossing your arms over, and how, Dawson, how you emphasize compassionate communication. And think of compassion, we often think of the heart space, and just how much that so physically goes to. Is your heart open? Are you closing it? Are your shoulders hunched forward? Or are you open and wide and receiving and giving? And like you said, it goes both ways. It's a subtle energy body thing. And the question that came to my mind, and when you shared that about the equilibrating, is how does one protect their aura, their energy, and have, I do agree, of course, there's going to be interaction with others, but it almost sounds like I'm seeing the domain bubble around instead of the word aura. I'm seeing the domain. And if we can really just take responsibility for our feelings, our emotions, what's in us, how impenetrable can we make that barrier to just be ourselves, and to not lose that, and to hopefully raise others through that, and to not just let it be some zero sum equilibrating. But and I don't have an answer to that. I'd actually love to hear one if anyone does have one. If that's not too far off topic, of how do we maintain that openness in the face of closeness?
That's a great prompt, man. The first thing coming to my mind is just deeply understanding our experience. If we can be fully present and aware of what we are experiencing, it will help us separate any like blame or any connection to what someone else might be doing, and really having ownership in our experience will help us prevent either that bleeding over into the other person, or responsibility for what we're experiencing being attributed to someone other than ourselves.
Also, I find quite tied to self-worth in a sense. If you are feel worthy and sort of accepting of who you are, it's a lot harder to, I think, be impacted by everybody else's thoughts on what should be in your domain. So it's sort of a I think it goes tandem with what Ian is saying there, is owning your experience and really like really knowing who you are in a sense, and that, you know, I think that though is also it's a challenge for so many people. So many people struggle with worthiness and struggle, and so then it's hard to, you know, going back full circle to what we were talking about before, to not necessarily feel like you have to change certain things to accommodate other people's needs. It's hard to own yourself nowadays, I think. I'd say that's one of the greatest challenges most everybody has in with themselves and in any relationship. I mean, we talk about, you know, all the time in our work, the attachment styles, right? And how much of that is actually tied to your own self-worth, what you think you deserve or what you think you can have. And that's, yeah. I'm a rambler, so I'm going to stop there.
That was great. That's it.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Thank you all for sharing. That's I heard a lot there, you know, like accepting ourselves, understanding ourselves, and there's I almost heard you didn't say the words, but I heard Nicole, like almost love yourself is one way, you know, that confidence and that acceptance of yourself and how that radiates. And it's so funny how that separation, it's inherent in our culture and our language and therefore in our minds, can really dilute us. And you can think of someone who has the most beautiful intent and really wants someone else to be happy. They're kind heart. We all know these people, but they're so down on themselves. They're so negative toward themselves. They might be self-deprecating or, oh, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I did that. That even though they really don't mean it, when you're around them, you feel some of that. You're picking up on that, and you might be, well, they're judging themselves that harshly. How harshly would they judge me? How harshly should I judge myself? That thing that they're not trying to, but like you said, and there's these energies, they go around, and it made me think of it's funny. All truth is paradox. So when you were talking, Nicole, it's so funny. Everything you say resonates. You know, own yourself. We can own our domain. We can own our rights and responsibilities, our thoughts and our emotions, and also we're all interdependent, and none of it is actually ours. So all truth is paradox. I think they live together, and it's okay that there's a paradox there. I really do. And one thing that came through was I know a practice I've done, and I've written about it before, and something I want to do more is the practice of metta, open loving kindness meditation, compassion meditation. I do that, but one thing I used to do much more, anytime I'd be in a public place and I would start to feel negative vibes, let's say I was anxious, I was at a concert, I'm in a crowd, one thing I would practice was immediately just trying to send metta to everyone, you know, just sending some loving kindness and good thoughts. May you be happy. I hope you're safe. I hope the best for you in your life. Things I can genuinely think and feel, and start to feel that heart open a little bit. And what was amazing to me was that I felt like I benefited tremendously from it. I can't say that they felt that. I can't say anything about if it, you know, went out into the world. I like to think so, but I'm a rational man. I haven't found the love-ometer for me to measure yet. So, you know, once the scientific method can back it up. But I know psychologically what happened is I started to recognize that what we put out, projection, is often what we feel like we're getting back. So no matter what any of these people around me thought, which likely they weren't thinking of me at all, I started to feel love coming back at me. So that was a really interesting moment for me where I started to take more responsibility for what I'm putting out and recognize that it really does something to how I perceive the world. And so I think that's where, from within our own domain, we really can be a very positive change. Simply, even in our thoughts, that wasn't even how I was acting, let alone if I actually took action and started giving out gifts or hugs or, you know, or saying compliments, which hopefully comes from that. But all of that has really helped me to try to look at that own experience, internal experience more, and try to take ownership. And I think responsibility is the real path to meaning. And kind of getting a farther afield, but I think it really ties in, because why would you want to take responsibility? You know, I think sometimes that can be really a heavy burden, but the burden comes with a reward, and it's often meaning. You think of the things that give you the most sense of stress and responsibility, they're often the things you find the most meaningful. So it's just maybe to wrap that, that's maybe the plug for it, for taking on that responsibility for our domains, is there is a benefit there, and hopefully a ripple effect that goes out. There can be.
I know we're not supposed to take things personally, but Derek, you were definitely just talking about me when you said the kind-hearted person who's so hard on themselves, incredibly self-deprecating, and you can actually totally feel it when you're around them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that has been me to a T for most of my life, and it got pretty, like, a couple years ago. It was rough, and I felt my friendships feeling my own feelings towards myself. I think they were starting to sort of bleed out into other friendships, and still obviously working on it. Who isn't? Trying to improve the internal self-acceptance and loving feelings. But have I noticed that it feels like the richness of my friendships that has actually come back the less I've been trash talking myself, sort of thing. I mean, I probably was no good to be around. That is probably tough to see, and so, and also, weirdly enough, you talked about the loving kindness, the meditation, and only in the last week has that, I have practiced it here and there in the past, but in the last week that's come up a lot for me. And I think I actually was at a concert where suddenly I was feeling a bit anxious. So very odd that you said that. And I was practicing that for just a moment there. And I had been thinking about, I think I'd pulled up Facebook for some reason and had this sort of like visceral reaction to a girl from my past who we were friends, and then something happened. And then all of a sudden I found myself just being like, why am I carrying this thing? And I practiced a loving kindness meditation to her. And I realized I had been blaming her for something that had happened to me because of something that had happened with her prior, and then my actions after that. And that's a story for another time. But yeah, I practiced the meta meditation, and when I tell you that I felt so much better, and now I actually feel, thinking about that person, truly the light, the heaviness of it went away. There is a lightness there, and I'm remembering, like, oh right, I don't need to feel that way towards you anymore. Like, I do wish you happiness. I do wish you to be safe. I do wish you to be well. And that's really all there is to it. And so, yeah.
Thank you for sharing. And I love the synchronicities. I love synchronicities for me. I always just, I hold them lightly. I try not to take them too seriously. What's the purpose of that? But they're like a little wink from the universe that, head in the right direction. So I hope that was a good wink for you, and a sign of things to come. And I love that you said then, you reminded me with the meta that I forgot one of the fact that I forgot to say it is really indicative of the issue with it. With meta, in other cultures, you traditionally start with yourself. You send love to yourself. And when I learned it from more Western teachers, and how I ended up learning and continue to practice it, is you start with others. And you start with somebody who's really easy to send love to, and then maybe you work up to harder and harder people you have difficult relationships or even negative relationships with, and then eventually to yourself. And that alone is something that teachers have found. People in the West, at least in our culture in the United States, to speak more narrowly to my experience, is people really have a hard time sending loving kindness to themselves, affecting or being really accepting of themselves more than others, more than strangers in a crowd, or even enemies. The ourselves comes last in most of these. And that is entirely a cultural construct and cultural thing that ties back again to that separation inherent in our language, that judgment, that way in which we really can't close ourselves off. And so I love that you brought that up and helped me remember, like, it's not just that there's a benefit to it for others, but there's immediately and inherently a benefit to ourselves. How we communicate to others is, in the end of the day, how we'll communicate to ourselves most of the time, whether we recognize it or not. So thank you for sharing.
I think that's a really good point. What you said about keep cat in the back.
Nope, just keep going. Don't acknowledge the cat.
So yeah, like what you were saying about how in our culture it's kind of more and more like reinforced that we should do good acts to others, and the emphasis on how we treat others and show love and compassion to others. And we kind of come second in our culture. Like it's not brought up that much. I mean, I don't even think it was until I started studying like psychology that I learned a lot about like self-care, something that should kind of feel, like basic, like everyone should know about self-care type things. But like it was things I hadn't even really thought much about of. And it's crazy that it took like that long, to even start practicing like self-care and like nurturing your inner child, things like that. Because yeah, like it kind of comes second. And when we do like love ourselves, Nicole, I completely agree with what you said. Like once you start, like loving yourself more and being more comfortable with yourself and accepting, it does impact your relationships too. Like it improves them like in a lot of ways, and a lot of like more security as well. So yeah, that really resonated with me.
Yeah. So Dawson, I think what you're saying there with how it improves, I think it again goes back to that defensiveness. Like if we think in conversations with other people or interactions with other people that they've said something about us having done them wrong, or we feel like they're saying that, right? We may be quicker to defend because we don't want this thing that we think is true about ourselves, this thing that we're so awful, we're so, we're not good enough, we're whatever, to be true. So we actually defend against this thing that we truly believe so much. But when we stop believing this thing or stop feeding into it, it actually so much easier to receive that feedback because it's not confirming, it's not a confirmation bias of this terrible limiting belief, right? And so I think it can become so much easier. So yeah, again, and that goes also back to the owning your own domain. Like this is also wrapped up together there. And yeah, but I also wanted to ask, talking about, you mentioned the self-care and the nurturing your inner child, and those are incredibly valuable to self-worth and self-love. So I am actually curious from a practical standpoint, how do you guys see these these things? What does self-care and nurturing your inner child mean to you and look like to you? Also, yeah. I cannot with this cat. It is so cute.
Yeah, she likes the attention. Go ahead, Dawson.
This is something I was talking to my girlfriend about the other day, and we were talking about how, like, this is specifically about the nurturing your inner child thing. We were talking about how there's a lot of correlations between activities that we do as children, and they kind of come full circle when we're like older. Like a lot of activities that are like perceived as like, child activities, old people do them as well, like doing puzzles and like doing art, like reading, things like that. And we were talking about like, why are they perceived that way? Like, why is this considered like an old people activity or like a kid activity? Like, we like doing it when we were a kid. Why don't we still do it now? And so like something we do a lot is like we just sit and build puzzles, and we do like art, we'll draw, just color, just things that like just bring us genuine joy that I might not have even thought to do in the past. But it's just like, it makes me feel good, it makes me feel like present in the moment. They're like very like mindful activities. So yeah, that's like a big part of self-care for me, is just doing things that like bring me joy. And a lot of it is also trying to stay away from like screen time, like doing things either in nature or just getting away from screens and doing things that are like real and just make me feel good. So that's my experience with it.
Yes, for me with self-care, I love the question. Thank you for reflecting that back. It's going to be good to hear everyone's. I I can think of a few. I'm sure there's more, but I want to limit it because they all come in waves, and I do them, and I don't want it to all sound like and this is what I do every single morning. Of course, this is what I try to do, and here are a few of the ones that have been maybe I just guess most salient right this moment. Affirmations are one of the big ways I've been working on changing that inner dialogue and that inner just orientation, even below the words, of course, what we're talking about here with that, what we're putting out to others, what we're putting into ourselves, and how those are more or less going to be the same thing. And no matter how we try to put the barriers up and pretend like we can keep the storm all inside and no one else is going to get wet and windblown if we, open up to them. Yeah, it's going to get out. So affirmations, daily affirmations, around so things that are just so simple. You deserve to be happy. You are grateful. You are whatever qualities I'm trying to get across. You speak truth to try to help me to be more honest. All these different ones that are there, and the four agreements, which I've adopted and put into an affirmation format to try to remind myself every morning and to try to live by. I am not making assumptions. I'm not taking things personally. I am being impeccable with my speech. I try to do these so much, and I find it helps. It at least seeds my thoughts with something positive to start the day, which is something better than, flipping up on Instagram first thing in the morning and letting the algorithm decide where my head will go. And then right with those, I try to do a gratitude right away. I try to think of things that I'm grateful for, and that helps me to open up a little bit and shift my mindset and find gratitude deeper inside of me. And it's finally just taking care of my own body. I wanted to mention this one because this has been huge, whether that's stretching, yoga, walking, exercising, the food that I bring in, hydration. One thing that I'm really sitting with now, and as I struggle from a decent amount of physical tension, pain, discomfort in different muscles, and how often do I just ignore those? How often do I not listen? We're talking so much about listening. How often do I not listen and hear my own body and what it's trying to tell me? For me, unfortunately, despite years and years and years of effort, that's most of the time I'm not listening, and it's been a real journey to try to listen more. One thing that's helped me, it's so similar to this meta concept and how we start with others. Why am I ignoring my own body? Would I do this for a beloved friend? If a beloved friend or my partner or a family member was going around saying, I hurt, I'm tight, what would I do? What do? I offer to help somehow. I offer to give them a massage. Can I get the heating pad? Can I make you a bath? What can I do? Why am I not doing that to myself? I've been sitting with that question. I don't have an answer. Why am I not treating myself like I would a beloved friend? I've been sitting with that a lot lately. And that's a little bit about my self-care journey. Thanks for asking.
Thanks for sharing, Derek. That was a beautiful, deep share. I wanted to share a couple of things that came up for me during that share and also connected to your question, Nicole, which was a great question. For me, hair is linked to doing what I which requires me to know myself. And so if it's play, what is my relationship with play? I need to know that in order to be able to know what I like to play. Similarly, you're talking about diet, Derek. It's important to listen to my body to know what's well received and what isn't. If I'm ignoring my body, because your body is constantly communicating to you, like it's constantly letting you, and there's a twinge here. Oh, well, there's probably a reason why it's sending you that signal. But if you ignore it, like we often, because we're often disconnected from our body, we're like, oh, well, my mind is here, my body is something else. It's just going to do whatever I tell it to do, which is in some cases, but also there will be consequences if you just tell your body what to do and you got a conversation. It needs to be a two-way conversation with your body, not I'm in charge, you do what I say. You're gonna have some misery come up if that's your relationship or how you communicate with your body. But that brings me back to something that came up earlier for me, which is the question of like, how do we know who we are, or that it's hard to know who we are? And I what came up for me was it's easy to have a lot of worth when we allow our self-worth to be determined by other people. And so the question that has been an extremely profound question for me, and I haven't figured out how to incorporate this into like a tangible exercise, or at least I haven't implemented one yet. But the question is, who am I? Who am I? The person that other people, am I the person that I see? Am I the person that I want to be? Am I the person that, am I my name? Am I the things that I've done? Like, who am I? This word I that we associate with ourselves. And eventually peel away these layers, these things that you associate with who you are, and you recognize, well, that's not who I am. My name is not who I am. That my actions in the past is not who I am. As you start to peel away those layers, it gets easier, maybe not easier at first, but eventually it takes you to a path of deeper understanding of who's really like driving this experience, who's having this experience, the observer, the awareness that is experiencing this reality. And so the ultimately, the more you can ask yourself that question, and the more answers you can give to that question of who am I, the more clarity that you can find, I think, will lead you to more responsibility, who you are, and less projecting that responsibility of determining who you are onto outside people around you.
I think that is really interesting, that the who am I, and thinking about sort of Derek's morning routine cannot be in, you're talking about, creating a sort of exercise around that cannot be part of your morning exercise. Is it, who am I today? Right? Today I am focused. Today I am playful. Today I'm a daughter. I'm at my mom's house. And so my priority, and my mom's birthday is this week, I'm here for the holidays. My priority is to be a daughter right now, to be here with her. Right? So maybe that's really the question, is who am I today? And it doesn't matter what you were yesterday, and that can help you lead to who you want to be tomorrow. But who am I today? And then thinking about a bit of like the self-care and the inner child, and how that can connect to knowing who we are as well. I do see, both Dawson and Derek, you guys took this in different directions. Dawson, I see you saying your self-care is nurturing that inner child. And Derek, I see you saying that your self-care is nurturing more so your now, your present, right? And so is there space in our world to do both? Maybe some people want more of one and want more of the other. And I think a big distinction here for the inner child is, so the thing the two of them I think have in common is being kind to yourself, right? You want to share compassion, you want to be, loving and hype yourself up and whatnot, but and offering your inner child so much of that in the present moment can be great. And then also introducing more play into our lives. And, Dawson, you said we did it as kids, we do it when we're older, but we don't do it in the world between. And it's because we decide that we're too busy, or we've got too much other obligations, or whatever it is. And something my brother-in-law told me at sort of like a difficult point in my life, when I was, I guess that same time where I was being quite hard on myself, he mentioned to me, do something fun every day, even if it's for 20 minutes. Just introduce 20 minutes of play into your day. Is it playing with the dog? Is it, jumping rope? Is it singing a song and dancing? Whatever it is. For me lately, it's been pottery. I've been having so much fun with that, and thinking about, as a kid, I loved being in the sandbox. I loved playing with mud. I loved finger painting. I was such a kinesthetic, kid, and really loved mushy stuff, I think. So yeah, I think self-care is both play and both present. And yeah, I don't know where I was going with that there, but suddenly I'm like, also a bath. And I loved baths as a kid too. Great time. Being in the water is just primo material.
But second, that I only feel right when I'm in a body of water of any kind. That's my flow state. It makes me think we all did come from the oceans and we just wait and go back to them. That's why we go there on vacation so often. We're ready. I got to be in the water.
Well, you are a body of water.
That's right. At least 70%, just like nonverbal communication. At least 70% nonverbal communication and water. Ask your healthcare provider before having 70% water. Nicole, thank you so much for those further reflections. And yeah, you guys all have me interested in exploring the inner child more and what that means. I really do like the term play, and it's something I've been trying to incorporate more. And it reminds me of the Alan Watts quote, "Do things that are delightful to you, and you thereby become delightful to others. You cannot give what you don't have." So those who are interested are interesting. You have to be interested in the world, and you will be interesting, but you can't do it if you don't have it for yourself. So it's the same with love. It's the same with starting close in for ourselves. So that was inspiring. And I'm already thinking about ways in which I want to play today. And Nicole, I also really liked how you took the who am I exercise and broke it into something doable. Who am I today? You simplified it. And so often, another mentor of mine just yesterday said something along the lines of can I see a complex problem and recognize that there might be a simple solution and not get lost in the complexity of it and try to, get lost in the complexity and instead open my mind up to simplicity. And I really like that. I think that breaking things into digestible chunks, letting us work with it where we can, meeting ourselves where we are. Yeah, I often in healthcare have a mantra of meet them where they're at, wherever they're at today. Don't push my agenda. Where that, and in this work, of course, in coaching and helping anyone, meet them where they're at. You can't, where else they're going to be. Good luck connecting to someone where they're not. Good luck. So meet them where they're at. Let's do that with ourselves too. And if who am I seems daunting, which it does to me, there's a lot of ways I can go. Who am I today? Who am I in this moment even? That was really helpful. And I think just a good tenet for any kind of change is, get it to as small of a thing as you need to, or for it to not be overwhelming, and start there. So I found those all very helpful. And again, I just love the questions being asked. One overriding principle I'm trying to embody, and a truth that I found again and again, and I lose and I get back to, is that when I'm really in the flow, when I'm being highest self, I'm asking far more questions than I am making statements. I'm almost exclusively asking questions. And there's where I find answers. I don't actually get the answers, but the answers are all around me when I'm asking questions. And as soon as I latch onto one, they're gone. It's an incredible process. So that curiosity, that communicating with curiosity and living with curiosity, I find it so helpful. And, conversations like this and with these curious people really help to inspire me for that.
Beautiful.
Yeah, as you were, oh, sorry, I was just going to say, as you were talking there, Derek, I realized there's like another level to the who am I. If we're only asking it of ourselves today, it allows us to change as individuals. And I think sometimes we get pigeonholed. We say, even labeled as, a nice a kind person, or a selfish person, or what, I don't know. These are terrible examples, but I do mean like sometimes as a people pleaser, I think people think of me as a nice person. I always have to act nice. I always have to do the nice thing, even if it's not always the thing I want to be doing. So by being able to sort of change who I am day to day, it kind of can help me give space to allow myself to change. When I was younger, I was kind of like a little bratty, right? But I grew out of that, and I'm no longer, bratty actually. I can be pretty bratty sometimes. There is a different word that I was going to use, but I didn't. But again, put this on the cutting room floor, please. Just Dylan, please take this out. But I just mean to say, like, I'm not who I once always was. And I probably won't always be this person now, but, or at least all aspects of this person. So
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Nicole. Uh, Real quick, for time, I'm, and I also I want to throw this thing out as this is our first podcast episode. Totally open to implementing things, taking things out, but I thought it would be cool to have like a prompt for the week or a question for the week or month or however often we're doing these, but leaving people with anyone listening for ourselves a prompt to take with us. And for me, the one that's jumping out to me is the question or the prompt is, who am I today? I think that's a great one to take with us. Something that I plan to be asking myself and check in with myself each morning when I have my mind practice. And something to think of as often as I can throughout the day. Who am I today? Who do I want to be? Who am I striving to be? And for me, being within my own domain, it's not who do others want me to be today or who do I want for others. It's who am I for me today? How do I want to show up, and what version of Ian is going to be presented today? And so if anyone has any other prompts or questions that they want to maybe almost like a final note before we sign off for this episode, if any final thoughts or prompts that we want to leave listeners or our with besides who am I today?
Yeah, I love the question. Again, ask some more questions. Thank you. And I wrote it down large in my journal, and I plan on asking it as part of my morning affirmations. I think that's so wonderful. And Nicole, I just love the way you, really cut through the solidity of identity and helped, point out that we're always changing, that things are always changing. It goes back to the beginning, that game that I didn't sign up for all these assumptions and rules. Who said we're going to be the same all the time? And when did we take on those characteristics? I am nice. I am always nice. I cannot be bad, or I am bad. Whatever these identities we are. I'm a generous person. I'm a selfish person. As soon as we adopt that, as soon as we put that in there and make it an assumption, and we start to lose awareness that we adopted it, it starts to rule us. And this question of who am I today really just so succinctly helps break through that. And my final thought is it's not a question, but just almost an image in the book Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. So Hermann Hesse, a lovely book about the Buddha, a fictionalized accounting of the Buddha. There's an incredible scene where Siddhartha's at a river and is meditating, staring contemplatively at the river for a long, long time. And he starts to meditate on and ponder how this chunk of river that he's looking at, this section of river, is the same section of river day after day, week after week. But every second, every single particle in that river, in that body of water is changing, is gone. How is it the same every day, but also completely, entirely different every second? I think of that often, and I feel like that image of the river will help as I ask myself, who am I today? Who am I right now?
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Dawson, Nicole, anything?
No, yeah, I think that's a great prompt. A good thing to think about. I'll be doing the same. I'm going to answer that question after this and really dive deep into that. But yeah, I don't have anything additional.
I think actually that prompt is fantastic for the name of this podcast. Be here now. This is who am I today? Who am I now? Right. And really hearing yourself, really hearing who do you want to be, and then showing up that way. And so I think communication starts with ourselves. It starts with listening to what's going on in us, right? And when we're able to do that, and also cultivate actual, communication and listening skills with others, right? This work is the two are completely united things, right? So it starts with us. And so I think that's a great thing to sort of kick this off with, is how are we listening to ourselves first and foremost? How are we reflecting that back into our day?
Beautiful. Well, thank you guys so much for your participation and energy and all of the prompts that you've shared. And I think that, be with where we've ended up with Who Am I Today? And I can't wait for future guys. Love y'all so much. And I hope you guys have a great day.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
This has been the Do You Feel Heard podcast. If you are interested in resources that will help you move through conflict, you can go to doyoufeelheard.com, where we have tools for individuals and couples.